I'm Alara. 2 weeks ago, my sister looked me in the eye and said, "You've ruined everything." And my mother, she just agreed. My stepfather stayed silent. Like always. I didn't scream. I didn't defend myself. I picked up my bag and walked out, with nothing but a cracked laptop and a silence they never knew how to hold. But this morning, I woke up to 19 missed calls. Now they say they need me. Before we dive in, what time are you listening to this? And where from drop a comment? Because maybe you've been erased too. Until the moment they realized they needed the one they discarded. It was already dark outside. It was already dark outside. But inside the house, the lights felt too bright, like they were meant for someone else. I stood quietly at the edge of the kitchen, my fingers wrapped around a chipped ceramic mug I had reheated twice. The tea was bitter now. I didn't sip it. I just held it, like something warm might make me feel less invisible. Kendra was at the center of the living room, perched perfectly on the cream sectional like a product display. Her ring light glowed behind her, casting that familiar soft halo around her head. 50,000 followers, she squealed into her phone screen, voice smooth and sweet like syrup. Hearts and fire emojis floated across the live stream. Monica, our mother, clapped softly as if Kendra had just announced a Nobel Prize. Howard, our stepfather, offered his signature silent nod. Never too loud, never too involved. My name hadn't been mentioned, not once. I stayed still, caught between rooms, like furniture that no one remembered buying. I'd gotten good at being background, easy to miss, easier to ignore. Sometimes I wondered if the walls noticed me more than they did. Then it happened. The laptop froze for half a second, the screen flickered, and Kendra's expression cracked. "Oh my God," she hissed, her voice jumping half an octave. "Not now." I didn't say anything. I didn't move, but her eyes shot to me like she'd been waiting for a reason. "Why does this always happen when you're around?" she snapped. "Still live, still smiling on camera like nothing had happened. You throw off my vibe, Alara, just by breathing." I blinked. Once, twice. I expected someone, anyone, to say something, to call it out for what it was ridiculous. But Monica stood up instead, brushing invisible lint from her lap with slow, graceful hands. "She's not wrong," she said calmly, like it was fact. "Every time something good happens, you find a way to ruin it. You've ruined her night. Honestly, you've ruined ours too." Howard didn't speak. He just rubbed the bridge of his nose like this scene had played before and would again. The flush rose to my neck. But I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I didn't ask. What did I do because I knew the answer wouldn't matter? I turned around. Walked slowly back down the hall to the guest bedroom, the one they let me use while I figured things out. The door stuck slightly in the frame. The carpet smelled like expired air freshener and dust. And that was the part no one saw. Not the glare of the ring light. Not the hearts on the screen. Just me, in the shadows of my own home. Knowing this wasn't new. This was just the first time it happened in front of an audience. I stood in the hallway long after their voices faded. My fingers were still wrapped around the chipped mug, now cold for the third time. Behind me, Kendra's laughter returned, soft, practiced, for the camera. Monica adjusted the pillows. Howard exhaled like peace had returned. None of them looked back. That was the moment I knew. Not the insults, not even the silence, but that stillness, like I had already left the room, even while standing there. I walked back to the guest room. The door creaked like it didn't want to close behind me, but I didn't hesitate. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long minute, staring at the bag I hadn't touched in months, the same one I'd used when I first came back here, when I still believed this was temporary, that we could repair something. Then, quietly, I began to pack. I didn't pack much, just the basics, a few changes of clothes, a phone charger, my worn-out planner with most of the pages blank. I didn't bring any framed photos, no letters, no keepsakes. I'd stopped writing those years ago, when I realized no one read them. The guest bedroom door creaked behind me as I zipped the backpack closed. It was the same one I used in college, black canvas, frayed at the seams, the zipper always catching on the lining. I hadn't touched it in months, maybe longer, but it still sat in the corner like it had been waiting for me to give up pretending this house was temporary, or safe, or mine. I didn't say goodbye. Didn't announce anything. I walked through the hallway slowly, my steps muffled by the old carpet, past the living room where Kendra was still smiling into her phone and Monica was fixing the throw pillows like nothing had happened. No one looked up. No one asked where I was going, or if I'd be back. The front door closed with a soft click behind me. Outside, the air felt cooler than I expected. It wrapped around my arms like something honest. The street was still, the kind of quiet that comes after something's already broken. I walked down the block with my hands shoved deep into my coat pockets and my backpack pressing against my spine like a lifeline. There weren't many cars out, just the soft hum of streetlights and the distant rustle of wind through brittle leaves. I didn't have a plan, only distance, only movement. 2 blocks down, I stepped into a gas station with flickering fluorescent lights. The hum buzzed in my ears like a mosquito that wouldn't land. I bought a granola bar and a bottle of water, more out of habit than hunger, and asked the clerk if the city bus was still running. "Last one's in about 8 minutes," he mumbled, not looking up. I nodded, then waited outside on a cold metal bench, the kind that made your back ache within minutes. I curled my fingers inside my sleeves and balanced the bottle between my knees. A car passed, then another. The minutes stretched. When the bus finally arrived, late, of course, I climbed on and found a seat near the back. I didn't look back at the house. I didn't need to. I already knew what I'd see. The porch light is still on. The curtains were still closed. The same life, continuing without pause. The ride into downtown Atlanta took longer than I remembered. Or maybe I just noticed the time more when I wasn't rushing toward something. I kept my head down, watching the lights outside blur past like watercolors left in the rain. No one spoke. No one stared. And strangely, that quiet felt like relief. When the bus reached the end of the line, I stepped off into a part of the city I hadn't visited in years. A few blocks later, I found a small beige motel tucked between a shuttered diner and a pawn shop. The neon sign above it flickered between vacancy and something unreadable. Inside, the front desk clerk didn't ask any questions. He barely looked up from the reality show playing on a dusty screen behind him. "Cash or card," he muttered. I handed over the last $42 I had in my wallet. He slid a key across the counter. The room number had been scratched out and rewritten in red marker. That felt fitting. The room smelled faintly of old cigarettes and overused bleach. The mattress creaked as I sat on the edge. Backpack at my feet. I didn't undress. Didn't check the window. I just sat there, listening to the silence. It wasn't peaceful exactly, but it was mine. I stared at the water stain on the ceiling for a long time. It looked like a cracked heart, or maybe a star burned out too early, depending on the angle, depending on how much hope you still had. I placed my phone face down on the nightstand. It didn't buzz, not once, no messages, no missed calls, not even from Monica. No, "Where are you? No, come home." Nothing. And I think that was the part that stung the least and the most, all at once, because deep down, I'd stopped expecting anything, but some small, stubborn part of me still hoped they'd notice when I disappeared. They didn't. And maybe that silence, as cruel as it was, finally gave me permission to breathe. I didn't sleep much that night. The mattress was thin, the sheets stiff, and the hum of the vending machine outside the window came and went like a slow tide. But mostly, it was my own thoughts that kept me up, half-formed questions circling each other. Where do I go next? What do I do with $0? 67 in my bank account, and a backpack full of clothes I don't even like by dawn. I gave up pretending to rest. The sky outside had turned the color of unwashed cotton, pale and heavy. I rinsed my face in the motel sink, tied my hair back, and gathered what little I had. The receipt from check-in sat crumpled on the nightstand. I folded it flat and tucked it into my coat pocket. For some reason, I felt like I might need to remember this day later. Out on the street. The air still held that early morning bite, sharp but strangely clean. I walked with no destination in mind until I saw it a little cafe across from the downtown bus depot, with a handwritten chalkboard sign propped up against the brick wall. Free Wi-Fi, coffee refills, open early. That was all I needed. Inside, The cafe smelled like burnt toast and lemon-scented floor cleaner. Not comforting, exactly, but familiar in the way old places are. The lights were dim, the table was scratched. A young man with headphones cleaned the glass pastry case without looking up. I ordered the smallest cup of coffee on the board, $1.75 plus tax, and paid in coins. He handed me the cup like I was invisible. Maybe I was. I chose the seat closest to the outlet and unpacked my laptop. It booted slowly, the way old machines do when they've been neglected. The loading icon spun like it was unsure whether I still counted. Eventually, the home screen appeared. I opened a browser and went straight to the tutoring platforms I had bookmarked years ago but never used. Back when I thought I'd start something on the side. Back when I still believed being helpful was enough. One of the sites still had a profile half filled in. I updated the basics: location, availability, pricing, and paused at the About Me section. The words didn't come easily. I sat there for a long time, staring at the blinking cursor, then typed "I believe in showing up, even when no one else does." That was the truth: quiet, unremarkable, but mine. Then I added more SAT prep, ACT support, study planning, patient, reliable, no fancy credentials, just the years I spent helping classmates, then cousins, then strangers who needed help. No one else had time to give. By noon, I had applied to 16 listings. Some were from parents panicked over college applications, some from adult learners trying to finish what life had interrupted. All of them were looking for something I recognized. A second chance, delivered quietly, without judgment. Around the fifth application, I paused. The words "reliable, compassionate listener" blinked up at me from the page. I didn't remember typing them, but they were true. I remembered how Grandma used to say that about me. You were always the one who listened. She'd whisper during Sunday dinners, while everyone else spoke over one another. She'd rest her hand lightly on mine and smile like she saw something no one else noticed. In that moment, sitting in a half-empty cafe with sticky floors and a lukewarm coffee, I felt something settle. Not hope, not pride, just presence. This was mine. Not impressive, not loud, but real. The young man behind the counter changed the music. A soft guitar played in the background. I glanced out the window, watching a city wake up without noticing me. That used to break me. Now, it felt like space to breathe. I took a sip of the coffee. It was bitter, but I was still here. And for the first time in a long time, that felt like a beginning, that afternoon. I stayed at the cafe until the light outside began to shift, until the edges of the day turned gold, then gray. I applied to more listings, rewrote a few cover messages, adjusted my hourly rate by 50 cents. It felt like building a house with toothpicks, delicate, uncertain. But I kept going. At some point, while waiting for another site to load, I found myself staring at the table, eyes unfocused. The worn wood grain blurred into something softer. A memory. It was the funeral, Grandma Eleanor's. We were in the reception hall of St. Augustine's, surrounded by polite people and bad coleslaw. I'd been standing alone, balancing a paper plate and blinking too fast. That's when a woman, I think her name was Darlene, a family friend from way back, walked over and touched my elbow gently. Her second letter was beautiful, she said, eyes warm. I hope it brought you some peace. I frowned. Second, she paused, her smile faltering. Yes, she said she wrote you another one. About 8 months before she passed, I'm sure it got to you. But it hadn't. I only received one letter from Grandma Eleanor. It came tucked into the inside cover of the book she left me, The Quiet Strength of Ivy. With her familiar looping handwriting, you always listened when no one else did. Don't let them make you forget how rare that is. I clung to that note like oxygen in the months that followed. But a second letter, the idea sank deep and stayed there. 3 days later, still unsure but trying to believe in the benefit of the doubt, I asked Monica. We were in the kitchen. She was slicing something. Apples, I think, for one of Kendra's clean-eating phases. I stood quietly by the counter, then said, "Did Grandma ever send me another letter?" Someone said she did. A few months before. Monica didn't even pause, didn't blink. She said, flatly, "Oh, probably." She wrote a lot of little notes near the end. Just sweet old lady things. Nothing important. Then she dropped the apple slices into a bowl and turned on the garbage disposal. The sound was deafening. I didn't ask again, but I never forgot how quickly she'd dismissed it. How easily my grandmother's words, my last real connection to someone who saw me, were reduced to background noise. Just sweet old lady things. Maybe it had been thrown out. Maybe it was hidden. Maybe it had never been sent. But the truth wasn't even the most painful part. It was that they didn't think it mattered, that anything meant for me was automatically considered disposable. In that cafe, I blinked away the memory and looked down at my screen. The cursor blinked back. Patient. Waiting. I started typing again. Not applications this time, just notes. Names. Moments. I typed things they said didn't matter. Things I wish I could unread. Things I still remember. I didn't know what I would do with that list yet. But writing it felt like proof I had existed. Proof someone tried to leave something for me once, and someone else chose not to let me see it. This time, I wouldn't forget. Not the letter, and not what it meant to have it buried. A few days later, just as the air in Atlanta began to turn from damp to sharp, there was a knock at my motel door. 3 short raps, hesitant but deliberate. I wasn't expecting anyone. I glanced through the peephole, and for a second, my breath caught. My breath. It was Jessa. We hadn't spoken in over a year. Maybe more. She used to be the kind of friend who showed up with takeout and hard truths. Someone who knew how to sit in silence without filling it. Then life pulled us in different directions. Hers into a new job. Mine into something smaller and quieter. I opened the door slowly. "Hey," she said, holding something wrapped in an old dish towel. Her face looked thinner, her eyes tired. "I know this is weird. Can I come in?" I nodded. No questions. Not yet. She stepped inside carefully, like she didn't want to disturb anything. The motel room was still the same. Bleach slick floor, humming mini fridge. 2 towels folded too precisely on the bathroom shelf. She sat on the edge of the bed and set the bundle on the table. "I found something," she said, unwrapping the cloth. Inside was a printed packet, pages stapled, slightly wrinkled from being stuffed into her bag. She slid it toward me. I recognized the layout before I read a single word. Pale blue headers, margin notes in faded gray. The same flowchart I had drawn and redrawn a dozen times to explain diagnostic reading patterns. Even the title, Success Steps Academy. Kendra's name was stamped across the top. I sat down, carefully. My hands didn't shake, but the silence inside me did. "She said you gave it to her," Jessa added quickly, her voice lower now. "Said you'd helped her develop it, but that she built it out herself. But Alara," she leaned in, "I recognized your voice in the intro paragraph. You always had a rhythm to how you explain things. It's you." I flipped through the pages, every line, every example, every resource pulled straight from the materials I had spent months building. Not for money, not for show, just because I loved helping kids make sense of things the world made too hard. I didn't say anything at first. I just reached for the envelope tucked into the mirror frame, the one with Grandma Eleanor's handwriting still soft and curved. I opened it and read the first line again. "You always listened when no one else did." Then I picked up a strip of tape and pinned the first screenshot to the wall beside it. Page 1 of Kendra's stolen curriculum. Side by side. 1 letter from love. 1 theft dressed in polish. I stepped back. My voice was quiet when it finally came. "They never noticed what I was building," I said. Half to Jessa, half to myself, because they never believed I could build anything. Jessa looked at me with something between apology and pride. "Well, I noticed." I nodded, still calm, still quiet. It wasn't rage that moved through me. It was clarity, and for the first time in a long time, the truth had somewhere to land. By the end of that week, something shifted. Not in me. I'd been changing in silence for a while, but out there, in the world that had always felt one step removed from mine. It started with a blog post. Small, niche, but sharp. A woman who specialized in educational equity had come across Kendra's site and flagged it for plagiarism. She didn't name me, yet, But she compared the Success Steps material with archived tutoring resources she remembered from a public learning forum years ago. Ones I had quietly contributed to under a username no one ever asked about. Within 48 hours, the story spread, first to a Reddit thread, then to a few teacher-focused Facebook groups. Screenshots were shared, old drafts resurfaced. Someone even found my diagnostic diagrams with timestamps. My name wasn't front and center, but it was there, in file names, in comments, in quiet credits never meant to be erased. That's when the calls started. First from a number I didn't recognize, then from Monica's cell, then Howard's. 19 missed calls in one morning. No one said the words I had once wanted to hear. No, I'm sorry. No, we didn't know. Just voicemails laced with urgency and calculation. Ilara, Monica's voice said, barely above a whisper. Your sister's being dragged online. This is serious. We need to handle it quickly and quietly. You know how these things spiral. Howard's message was shorter. Call your mother. She's worried. We need to talk. There was no mention of what had been taken, no acknowledgement of the work that had been mine, only panic that the image they had crafted, curated so carefully around Kendra, was beginning to crack. I didn't answer. Not when the text came in, not when Monica tried again with a longer message, not when Howard sent a clipped, passive-aggressive follow-up about keeping the family intact. And then came the email, from Kendra herself, subject line, seriously. The message was short, and sharp enough to draw blood. You've always been jealous. You couldn't stand that I finally made something of myself, and now you want to take it away. We gave you everything, and you do this no greeting, no signature, just blame typed out like a reflex. I stared at the screen, the cursor blinking at the end of her sentence, not because I didn't know what to say, but because, for the first time, I knew I didn't have to say anything at all. Not to her, not to them. They wanted me to respond, to defend, to soothe, to explain why my existence had always made them uncomfortable. But I'd done that before, for years, in different words, at different tables, on different holidays when they pretended to remember I was still there. Not this time. This time. I closed the email, shut the laptop, let the silence stretch, because if the only time they could say my name was when something broke, then maybe it was never about me to begin with. Maybe I'd only ever been useful as the shadow to their spotlight, and maybe I was done being their shape to blame. The day after Kendra's email, I couldn't shake the weight in my chest, not anger, not even betrayal anymore, just that familiar ache of being spoken about, not spoken to. I stayed in bed longer than usual, the motel ceiling casting soft shadows above me. The water stain had started to resemble something new each morning. A cloud, a map, a wound. Eventually, I reached for my laptop, not out of urgency, but out of instinct. I needed to be near something that was mine. I opened my folders, just to look at the curriculum I'd built, the drafts, the rubrics, the outlines I had stayed up until 2 a.m. writing years ago. Proof that I wasn't imagining what I had made. That's when I saw it. A folder I hadn't opened in years, tucked between old job applications and lesson plans. Eleanor Legal. I clicked without thinking. Inside was a single PDF, no thumbnail. Just the title Will_O_Thompson_Eleanor Final. PDF, I had uploaded it 5 years ago. After a notary appointment, Grandma insisted I attend with her one quiet Tuesday afternoon. At the time, I hadn't understood the urgency. I thought it was just something older people did. Tie up loose ends. She had smiled at me on the drive back and said, "Don't worry. Honey, it's not about death. It's about making sure your voice doesn't get lost." I hadn't looked at the document since. My fingers hovered, then double-clicked. The scan opened in a soft, faded gray. The first page was formal, a few lines of legal language I didn't fully follow. But then, halfway down the second page, I found it. All educational materials, intellectual property, curriculum designs, and preparatory content co-developed or authored by Ilara Thompson shall remain under her sole name and ownership. Per my wishes, and in recognition of her independent contributions. Beneath it, her signature, then a notary stamp, a date, a seal, clear, undeniable. I sat there for a long time, the laptop warm beneath my hands, the motel air thick with stillness. This document had existed the entire time, while Kendra pitched her programs, while Monica nodded through interviews, while I questioned whether I had imagined the worth of my own work. And they had known. Someone in that house, probably Monica, had seen this file, read these lines, and decided they didn't matter. Or worse, decided I didn't matter enough for them to honor it. But Eleanor had. She had honored me in the quietest, most binding way she could, legally, permanently. I hit print at the public library that afternoon. The paper came out slightly crooked, the toner uneven. But I didn't care. I folded the pages gently and carried them back like something sacred. At the motel, I took down one of Kendra's stolen lesson screenshots from the wall and pinned this up beside it. The two papers hung side by side, one full of branding and theft, one full of protection and truth. A letter from the living and a letter from the dead. And between them, finally, a name that couldn't be erased. Mine. The printed copy of Grandma Eleanor's will stayed on my wall for days. I'd glance at it between tutoring sessions, between emails, between moments when the quiet got too loud. I didn't touch it. I didn't frame it. I just let it be what it was. Undeniable. By the end of that week, I had started breathing differently, not because anything outside had softened, but because something inside had shifted. I wasn't waiting anymore, not for permission, not for acknowledgement, certainly not for apology. That's why. When the knock came at 6:47 p.m. on a Thursday evening, I didn't flinch. 3 knocks, firm, familiar. I looked through the peephole and saw all 3 of them. Monica in her cream cardigan, arms folded tight. Howard standing slightly behind, eyes tired, mouth drawn. Kendra to the side, makeup smeared just enough to look unplanned. I opened the door. But I didn't move aside. "Alara," Monica said first, voice low like we were in a church or a courtroom. "We wanted to talk in person." I said nothing. She clasped her hands in front of her, a habit she always fell into when she needed to look humble. "We made mistakes," she said. "But family means forgiveness." I held her gaze for a beat, then another. "No," I said quietly. "Family meant not burning my letters. It meant opening the envelope I mailed for your birthday. It meant saying my name in your interviews when you talked about how far Kendra had come." Monica looked down. Howard said nothing. He never did. Kendra stepped forward, her voice tight. "You've always been dramatic." I didn't respond to her. Not directly. Instead, I turned slightly and gestured behind me, toward the wall in my room, where 3 sheets of paper now lived. One was Eleanor's will, one was Kendra's email. The third was the envelope Jessa had found, my birthday card to Monica, still sealed, still ignored, its words untouched. "This," I said, "is what I was left with." Kendra glanced past me, saw the papers, then looked away. "You think locking us out makes you right?" Monica asked, voice thinner now. "No," I said, "it just makes me free." I didn't yell. I didn't explain. I simply stepped back inside and closed the door. There was no slam, just a click. Final, clean. I stood there for a moment, my hand still on the knob, listening to the sound of their footsteps fading. It wasn't power I felt. It was something quieter. Like closing a book you finally understand wasn't written for you, and deciding that you no longer need to read it to know how it ends. The silence after I closed the door didn't last long. 2 days later, I woke to a red notification on my phone. "Your website has been temporarily suspended due to a reported copyright violation." The words sat sharp against the screen like a warning label. At first, I stared at them without blinking, as if they'd dissolve if I waited long enough. But they didn't. A second email followed, then a third, all saying the same thing: content removed, account flagged, ownership disputed, no sender name, just a claim filed from an anonymized IP address. Through a digital protection firm I recognized from Kendra's previous posts, she hadn't come with words this time. She came with lawyers. But what she didn't know, or maybe forgot, is that I had already been here. I had already gathered everything. By noon, I was on a video call with Andrea Keller, an intellectual property attorney based out of Nashville. She was in her 50s, with silver-rimmed glasses and a voice that didn't rise unless it needed to. She read the notice once, then again, slower. When she spoke, it was with quiet certainty. "They're trying to erase the erasure," she said, "but they're too late." I pulled up the folder on my desktop marked Curriculum Archive. Inside were the original drafts of every lesson plan, every outline, every visual aid I had created over the past 5 years. Each file named and dated, some even backed up to cloud storage with timestamps that couldn't be edited. I showed her side-by-side comparisons between my materials and the pages on Kendra's site. The phrasing, the structure, even the footer. Then I opened the will. I zoomed in on the clause. My name, the ownership rights, Eleanor's signature and notary seal. Andrea didn't speak for a moment. She just nodded slowly, like she was lining up dominoes. "You don't need a lawsuit to prove this," she said. "You just need documentation. And now you have it. All of it." I didn't smile. I didn't breathe easier. I just felt aligned. Later that evening, I sat at the small table by my motel window and opened a new email draft. The sun had begun to dip behind the buildings outside, casting long shadows across my desk. I wrote each sentence like I was placing stones in a foundation. Subject response to copyright violation claim body, in light of the recent dispute. Please find attached all original curriculum files, timestamp development drafts, legal documentation verifying authorship, and the notarized clause from the estate of Eleanor Thompson. I am the sole creator of the educational materials in question. I respectfully request the full reinstatement of my site and materials as per documented evidence. Thank you for your time and review. Elara Thompson. I attached the documents, read the message twice, and hit send. No dramatics, no anger, just truth, structured and visible, for so long. I had been told to stay quiet, to keep the peace, to not make waves, but peace built on silence wasn't peace. It was erasure with better lighting, and this time, I had my own spotlight. It wasn't loud. It wasn't even bright. But it was mine, and I was ready. The response didn't come all at once. It started like a low hum. One email from a former client thanking me for my professionalism. One message from a student I'd helped with essay structure the year before. Then came a repost. A quiet thread on a small educators forum. "This curriculum looks familiar. Wasn't this Elara Thompson's work?" And then, it accelerated. Within hours, a former intern from Kendra's team, someone she had once dismissed in a single sentence, posted screenshots, internal documents, chat logs, even early Canva templates with file names like Elara Original _V2. There it was, time-stamped, labeled, tracked. My name wasn't just mentioned, it was undeniable. Kendra tried to respond. Vague captions, passive statements. People love to take credit once the work is done. Funny how silence becomes strategy when you're not the one in the spotlight. But the comments turned fast. "Why is Elara's name on all the drafts? I remember her from my son's GED prep. She built this. This isn't rivalry. This is reclamation." I didn't jump into the thread. I didn't argue. Instead, I did what I knew how to do best. I spoke simply, clearly, and only when I was ready. Late that night, I recorded a short video. No music, no filters. Just me in the corner of my shared apartment, sitting at the desk I'd bought secondhand. A single lamp casting warm light behind me. My voice was low, steady. I began by holding up Eleanor's will. I read the paragraph aloud, the clause confirming my sole ownership of the curriculum. Then I placed the paper down and opened my laptop. I screen shared the original drafts, the version history, the comparison files, the email from Kendra's agency, where my name had been scrubbed, the envelope from my mother, still sealed, and at the end, I looked straight into the lens. "They say silence is strength," I said quietly. "But sometimes, truth needs to be spoken aloud. This is mine." Then I ended the video. No pleas, no hashtags, no demands, just the facts. By morning, the video had spread farther than I could track. Teachers I'd never met were sharing it on LinkedIn. Bloggers on TikTok stitched it into commentary. A mother from Houston reposted it with the caption, "She helped my daughter believe in her own voice again." Give credit where it's due. Even Reddit, which had once hosted threads doubting my story, flagged the original post as misleading, and locked it. The mods cited new evidence, publicly, permanently, for the first time. I didn't feel erased. I felt seen, not as a victim, not as someone jealous, but as the one who had built something real. And now, it had a name again. Mine. 3 days after the video went live, a package arrived at my door. It came by certified mail. Signature required. Thick envelope. No return address, but the kind of weight that made your fingers tense before you even opened it. I already knew what it was. The timing was too perfect, too predictable. Inside a settlement agreement, typed in clean, sterile font, no warmth, no acknowledgement, just terms, a 6-figure offer, enough to buy silence, enough to erase a video, enough to convince someone, anyone, that the truth could be smoothed over with a check and a clause. The conditions were clear: withdraw all claims, remove all content related to the dispute, sign a non-disparagement agreement, and agree to never speak publicly about the matter again. In exchange, full rights restored. Quietly, privately. I read it twice. Once as the woman I used to be, the one who might have said yes just to finally be seen. Then again as the woman I had become, the one who no longer asked for space at their table. And then I walked to my shredder. I fed the papers in slowly, letting the blades turn that offer into dust. No anger, no noise, just clarity. That afternoon, I posted a still image, one clean photo, no captions, no filters, just a white background, black lettering. You don't owe people silence just because they share your last name. And beneath it, my name. Within hours, it was everywhere. Women reposted it on stories. Teachers printed it and taped it to their desks. Daughters who had been gaslit out of inheritances. Sisters who had been rewritten out of memories. Mothers who had once been told to keep the peace or be the bigger person. They shared it not for drama, not for revenge, but because it named something they'd carried too long without words. One comment read, "I thought I was the only one. Thank you for saying what I couldn't." Another, "They tried to bury me in silence too, but here I am. I didn't respond to them all. I didn't have to." Their voices stood on their own. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't alone in the quiet. I was surrounded by women who knew what it meant to be erased, and what it meant to return without needing permission. I didn't win by fighting louder. I won by staying rooted in what was mine: truth, voice, and the freedom to never need their approval again. I haven't heard from them since, not on birthdays, not when Kendra's site was permanently shut down, not when Monica quietly sold the house. Rumors whispered it was to cover legal costs. Others said she simply couldn't bear walking past a wall that used to hold a portrait with my face in it. But I didn't wait for explanations. I didn't need apologies tucked into secondhand stories. I stopped checking the shadows for their voices. I stopped hoping they'd turn around. Because by then, I had already turned forward. With the income I earned from rebuilding my tutoring platform, this time under my own name, with everything documented, protected, I set aside a small fund. Nothing flashy, just a quiet scholarship in Grandma Eleanor's name. It wasn't about erasing the past. It was about honoring the one person who never tried to edit me out of hers. The first scholarship letter went out last month. A girl named Maya, 16, bright, curious, and constantly being told she was too much. She dreams of becoming a writer. Her parents wanted her to study accounting. I included a copy of a note, the one Grandma wrote to me all those years ago. "You will build what no one sees today." I printed a second version of that line and pinned it above my new desk. The view isn't much, just a bus stop and a tree that leans like it's tired of trying to stand straight. But the light comes in softly around 3 p.m., and that's enough. The walls of my new office aren't covered in degrees or framed praise. Just 3 papers: the will, the email, the envelope that was never opened, each one a piece of the life they tried to silence, each one a reminder that I survived anyway, not with noise, not with revenge, but with truth stitched into something lasting. And now, no one can erase me, not because I fought to be seen, but because I stayed long enough to build a life worth being seen in. Quiet, steady, mine. If you've ever been silenced by the people who should have protected you, or erased until they needed what only you could give, drop a comment. I'd love to know where you're listening from. And if this story echoed something inside you, consider subscribing, because sometimes the quietest ones are the ones finally worth hearing.